Today, we're continuing the topic we started last week and which is super critical for any company, specifically anyone in a leadership position. How to manage fear and anxiety in the corporate context. As a leader in today's world, it's crucial to recognize that stress, fear, and anxiety have a profound impact on all aspects of work, from productivity and innovation to retention and collaboration. So why does this matter for you and us as a leader? Well, nearly 31% of US adults will experience an anxiety disorder at some point in their lives. In order to avoid this, here are some tips, 6+1 practical steps, how leaders indeed can create a safe environment for their people where innovation, collaboration, and speedy decision-making and action is possible. Welcome back everyone to this week's episode of The Mammoth in the Room. Nicholas Bocconi, CEO of Mammoth Leadership Sciences. Today, we're continuing the topic we started last week and which is super critical for any company, specifically anyone in a leadership position. How to manage fear and anxiety in the corporate context. Last week, we dove a bit into the topic of fear, specifically on its neurobiology, why fear is even existing, its evolutionary reason for existence, and the fact that you can't eradicate something completely which has stood the test of time since our evolution began millions of years ago. Although, and we also touched on that, there are many theorists who unfortunately try to convince us or you to believe just that. It doesn't work. It's part of our millennia evolved neurobiology. But, and that is also what we said, what you can do and actually need to do is to manage it, to mitigate its negative effects. And that is what this week's episode is about. But before we begin, make sure to subscribe and follow our podcast for deeper dives into the science of leadership. Give us some reviews on the YouTube channel or wherever you get your audio podcast from. So, let's get into it. In November 2020, the Journal of Psychiatric Research released a report titled Trends in Anxiety Among Adults in the United States from 2008 to 2018. And all the publications we are referencing today are, of course, again in the show notes. This report highlighted a troubling trend. Anxiety levels have risen steadily across all racial, ethnic, gender, and income groups in the US over the past decade. In 2017, the APA named the 3 most common sources of stress: 1, future of the nation; 2, money; and 3, work. And this was before the COVID-19 pandemic threw the world into turmoil. Fast forward to 2020, and the APA issued a stark warning. The US was facing a national mental health crisis that could have severe health and social consequences for years to come. By November 21, this wave of stress and anxiety hit the workplace in a phenomenon we now know as the Great Resignation, with quit rates reaching a 20-year high. Many experts agree that burnout, characterized by emotional and physical exhaustion driven by chronic stress, was one of the main factors behind this unprecedented labor shift. As a leader in today's world, it's crucial to recognize that stress, fear, and anxiety have a profound impact on all aspects of work, from productivity and innovation to retention and collaboration. These aren't just soft issues to be dealt with. They directly affect your company's performance and strategy execution. So let's explore how we as leaders can better manage these dynamics in the workplace. Before we dive into practical solutions, let's get clear on what we've been talking about. So stress, fear, and anxiety are terms that are often interchangeably used, but they are not the same thing. Let's talk about stress first. The World Health Organization defines stress as a state of worry or mental tension caused by a difficult situation. Stress is a natural human response to challenges and threats. A little bit of stress can actually be good. helping you to rise to a challenge. But too much stress, especially over prolonged periods, can lead to both physical and mental health problems. Then fear. So fear, on the other hand, is more immediate and it tends biological response to a present danger. Think of fear as the instinct that kicks in when you encounter an immediate threat like a bear in the woods. It's your body's way of protecting you in that moment. The last one we discuss here is anxiety. That is different from fear. It's a future-orientated response. It's an emotion characterized by worry, tension, and physical symptoms like elevated blood pressure. While fear responds to an identifiable present threat, anxiety is more generalized and often related to uncertain, diffuse threats in the future. Evolutionary researchers theorize that anxiety helped early humans by making us more cautious and prepared in a world full of predators. Unfortunately, in today's world, this useful trait can become debilitating. So why does this matter for you and us as a leader? Well, nearly 31% of US adults will experience an anxiety disorder at some point in their lives. This means a significant portion of your workforce is dealing with these issues, whether you realize it or not. Now, what are we going to do about it? To manage fear, you first have to understand the mechanics of power and how it plays out in the workplace. When you are in a leadership position, by default, you hold more power than your employees. This power might come from your ability to make decisions, approve projects, set KPIs, or decide who gets a raise or a promotion. Whether you realize it or not, want it or not, this power can create an atmosphere of fear. Even if you don't use intimidation as a tactic, I hope you don't, the simple fact that you hold the power to impact somebody's career, income, reputation, and in all of that, have an impact on a person's family situation can and does create anxiety. Now, power is not inherently bad. It's necessary for leadership. But how you manage that power can either create a culture of trust or one of fear. And as you grow in your leadership journey, you must become more aware of how your power affects those around you. The concept of power is not new. In fact, already back in 1959, social psychologists John R.P. French and Bertram Raven published a paper called The Basis of Social Power. They categorized power into several types, and these are all at play in a corporate setting, all at the same time. Let's start with the first one, expert power. This comes from a person's knowledge or expertise in a specific area. The more knowledgeable someone is, the more influence they can have. Referent power. This is based on a person's likability or charisma. People will follow someone they admire or want to be associated with. Legitimate power. This comes from holding a particular position within an organization. It's the formal authority that comes with a job title. Reward power. The ability to give rewards, such as bonuses, promotion, or recognition. The more valuable the reward, the more power this person holds. And then coercive power, the ability to punish or apply pressure to get what you want. This is often where fear originates, as people may worry about the consequences of not complying. In any organization, leaders wield these powers in different ways, and it's essential to be aware of how each one influences the people you lead. And these powers are all interconnected as well. Your team is constantly aware of your power, especially the coercive and reward types, and that awareness can create fear and anxiety. Now, let's be clear, fear is a natural part of the human experience. It's baked into our DNA, because for millennia it has kept us alive and still does. Our brains are hardwired to react quickly to threats, triggering the famous fight or flight or freeze response. This response was critical when our ancestors faced immediate physical dangers like predators. But in today's corporate environment, those same instincts can be triggered by non-physical threats, such as a difficult boss, a looming deadline, or an upcoming performance review. The result? the same psychological responses and the same physiological responses, like increased heart rate, rapid breathing, and heightened awareness, are activated even though the threat is not life-threatening. This can lead to stress, burnout, and a decrease in productivity. Don't tell me or yourself or anyone else you don't fear anything. Not fearing anything means nothing left to lose, and I hope you're not there. Now, the trick is not to try to eliminate fear. No one can anyway, but to manage it effectively. You can't remove fear from the equation, but you can learn to work with it. Let's start with understanding how fear works in yourself and in your team. Now, what's the leadership challenge? Well, it's creating safe or as safe as possible environments. As a leader, your job isn't just about driving results. It's about creating an environment where people feel as safe as possible, engaged and empowered to do their best work. If your team is constantly stressed, fearful or anxious, they can't function at their best. Your job is to help them manage these emotions, and that begins with understanding your own stress, fear and anxiety. If you are not self-aware, you might inadvertently contribute to the problem. According to a Forbes article from April 2023, the stress felt by managers can cascade to employees, impacting well-being, retention, and performance. Managers who act erratically, or are emotionally volatile, or ignore the emotions of their employees, create a toxic work environment. Employees in these settings are 62% more likely to leave their jobs and 56% more likely to disengage entirely. So, the first step is to know yourself. Take a good look at how your stress and anxiety might be influencing your leadership behaviors. Are you inadvertently creating stress for your team through micromanagement, last-minute requests, or emotional volatility? If so, it's time to take action. Now, I've seen firsthand the cost of poor leadership on mental health, the negative effects that stress, fear, and anxiety can have in the workplace. I've witnessed employees lose sleep for weeks before a big presentation. I've seen irresponsible leaders send last-minute weekend emails or pivot strategies without considering the impact on their team's work-life balance. I've even watched employees tremble in fear before walking into a high-stakes meeting with executives. And if you're asking what kind of risk you are facing as a leader when you're not managing this effectively, well, here are some of them to make it tangible. One is fear of failure. In many workplaces, fear of failure is a major driver for employee behavior. When employees are afraid of making mistakes, they may become overly cautious, taking fewer risks and avoiding innovative ideas. This can and will stifle creativity and lead to a culture of playing it safe, where employees prioritize avoiding errors over striving for excellence. Impact on dynamics? Well, reduced innovation, lower engagement, and a blame culture. Then, fear of job security. Fear of losing one's job is a potent stressor, particularly in times of organizational change, such as during restructuring or layoffs. This fear can lead to job insecurity, which erodes trust and loyalty within the organization. The impact on dynamics? Lower morale, reduced productivity, toxic competition. Then, fear of authority. Fear of leaders or managers often arises when there is a hierarchical structure in which leadership is seen as punitive rather than supportive. In such environments, employees may fear retribution for disagreeing with their superiors or providing critical feedback. Impact on dynamics? The risks you face? Well, lack of open communication, micromanagement, we need more control, and disengagement. Then fear of rejection or judgment. In workplaces where employees fear judgment from their peers or managers, they may hesitate to share their opinions, take ownership of tasks, or volunteer for leadership roles. This fear is particularly prevalent in environments that lack psychological safety, where employees do not feel comfortable taking risks or being vulnerable. Impact on dynamics, your risks as a leader, your risk as a team, silencing of ideas, groupthink, and limited individual growth. And then fear of change. Change is a constant in modern workplaces, whether it's the introduction of new technologies, restructuring, or shifts in strategic direction. In fact, when you read my book, change and constant transformation is the only thing which keeps your business alive tomorrow. Employees often fear change due to the uncertainty it brings. Fear of the unknown, fear of losing status, or fear of being unable to adapt. Impact on dynamics, the risk you're facing? Well, resistant to change, decreased adaptability, team friction. So, in order to avoid this, here are some tips. 6+1, I explain it in a second. 6+1 practical steps how leaders indeed can create a safe environment for their people where innovation, collaboration, and speedy decision making and action is possible. Number 1, make safety a team goal. Creating a safe environment isn't something you can do alone. It requires buy-in from the entire team. Engage your team in a dialogue about what a safe culture looks like and how you can achieve it together. The more input they have in the process, the more likely they are to commit to making it a reality. Secondly, be vulnerable. Trust is the foundation of a safe environment, and trust is also improved through showing genuine vulnerability. I do not know everything, and I also don't pretend to know everything. Let your team see that you don't have all the answers. Admit when you're wrong, share your concerns, demonstrate that power and vulnerability can coexist. Being authentically vulnerable allows your team to follow your lead and feel more comfortable sharing their own concerns and challenges. 3, very important, admit mistakes. Self-confident leaders aren't afraid to admit when they made a mistake. When you own your errors, you set a powerful example for your team. It gives them permission to take risks, make mistakes, and learn from them rather than hiding or deflecting blame. This is crucial for building an environment where innovation can thrive. To the opposite, share your mistakes and let it become a moment of organizational learning and reflection. Just think about how often I do that here on the podcast, where I share my mistakes. I'm actually proudly sharing my mistakes because I learned from them and others might also learn from them. 4, super critical, mind your narcissism. That's a big one. We all have egos. It's part of being human. But when your ego starts to dominate your leadership style, you're veering into dangerous territory. Narcissistic behavior, whether it's guarding your territory, deflecting criticism, or needing to be the smartest person in the room, can destroy trust and foster anxiety. Keep your ego in check, especially in high-stress situations. 5, remember that stress and anxiety are contagious. Stress, fear, and anxiety can spread through a team like wildfire. Body language, tone of voice, and facial expressions all play a role in transmitting these emotions. As a leader, you need to be hyper-aware of the signals you're sending to your team, especially during times of stress. Your team will take their cues from you, so make sure your body language aligns with the message you want to send. You cannot walk out of a boardroom meeting about maybe a restructure initiative in your company, tell everyone everything is fine, but you run around with hanging shoulders and with a worrying view on your face. That transcends immediately. Don't do that. Be aware of how others will perceive you. And then encourage open dialogue. That's number 6. Encourage your team to speak openly about their challenges and stressors. Create forums or channels where they feel safe to share their concerns without fear or retribution. Actively listen and respond with empathy. When your team knows that they can voice their worries without facing negative consequences, you will foster a more resilient and adaptable workforce. So this was 1 to 6. And now the +1. So that's why I call it 6+1. And that 1 at the end is live it. Don't pretend. Don't be that manager who encourages open communication and then once you are criticized, your small ego takes over and you are offended by the comment and take issue against the person who gave you the honor of his or her feedback. Do you know how often I see that happen? How dare someone say this to me, is what these leaders think in that moment. Don't be one of them. If you are one of these nosy chaps, I have a solution for you. Go to the boxing gym or any other martial arts club and get yourself beaten up. It helps to get humble. Anyway, jokes aside, here's a quick summary takeaway from today's episode. In today's high-stress, fast-moving business environment, leaders need to go beyond managing tasks and projects. They need to manage emotions, both their own and those of their teams. Stress, fear, and anxiety are part of the human condition, but they don't have to rule your workplace. By fostering a culture of safety, empathy, and open communication, you can help your team navigate these challenges and come out stronger on the other side. Remember, as we said many times from the get-go of this podcast, as a business leader, you don't lead the business, you lead the people who do the business. And it's their well-being that will ultimately determine your and their success. All right, thank you for tuning into this week's show. If you found today's discussion helpful, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with your network. Until next time, lead with empathy, inspire with purpose, and cultivate motivation from within. And lastly, if you're interested in more, you can order my book. It has the same title as this podcast, The Mammoth in the Room. It offers a practical roadmap how great leaders and their teams embrace evolutionary truths for outstanding business results. And it does that in 3 sections: on people, on strategy, and on implementation. Thank you very much. Nicholas Bocconi, The Mammoth in the Room.